Okay, so welcome to the Minecraft podcast. My name is Dr. Kimberly Quinn, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Dr. Tom Myers.
Hi.
Yes,
Thank
we're
you
pretty
for-
pumped, right?
Yeah, we're always pumped, right?
We're always
Always
pumped.
a lot to,
'Cause,
so many good things to talk about.
So many good things to talk about, and Tom and I are all about the, optimal human functioning, life satisfaction, all of it. So today we were inspired to talk about the importance of meaning and purpose, because without it, straight road to depression, right? Or at the very least, sadness.
Yeah.
We can't function without it, right?
Yeah, and kind of a meandering through life without direction. Having any kind of a sense of impetus to do what your calling is, and kind of we go back to the discussion of meaning, purpose, and the added word of a calling. What is your calling? And now don't want to get too lofty about that, but I think we all do have a sense of who we are, what are our capabilities, our talents, strengths, and gifts that we can then put into action that can affect change, positive change, we hope. So,
Right.
yeah,
I think the calling thing, so I just did recap. Tom and I were talking about this earlier, but that the job, at least because purpose doesn't necessarily have to be an occupation, right? But job, career, calling, I think it's important to just put that out there, that they're levels. Job is mostly extrinsically motivated by money. Not saying that's bad. We all need paychecks. Most of us do anyway. Job, and then career has a little bit more of an investment with education and training. It usually a little bit longer lasting, more happiness, good stuff comes out usually. Again, it doesn't mean you're miserable at a job, but it's different and longer lasting happiness. And then calling, which is what Tom's talking about, right? Is it's that one thing that we know we were put on this earth to do.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned something I'd love to have you tease out a little bit, because we as psychologists are always talking about intrinsic, extrinsic. And if you could, Kim, just kind of tease out for folks what extrinsic and what intrinsic motivation.
Yes, probably you're right, because when you're talking shop,
because I always get into the jargon and
then you're okay, sure. So extrinsic means basically external motivation. So for example, a paycheck. So we're not saying a paycheck is bad, right? We need paychecks. Also works for the negative. If we're not speeding simply to avoid a ticket, not like because you shouldn't go so fast to a residential area or something, but we're the strings are pulled from the outside. Whereas intrinsic is much longer lasting, because you're driven by passion, right? You're driven by passion and how you feel, how you feel, and that inner voice.
Yeah.
That's how they're so different.
That's good. And so for many of my students over the years, the extrinsic motivation for taking classes is grades. Okay.
Great.
Parental, again, the pressures of paying for college,
parental
approval, peer approval, right? As opposed to the intrinsic side, I want to better myself. I want to learn, more about who I am. I'm driven internally, intrinsically by this motivation to learn. Learn more, better myself. Yeah, grades is the external side. Internally, it's that for that betterment. So it kind of goes where I was getting that too, and thank you for that. But it's just kind of an intrinsic motivation of what is a drive for a sense of purpose and meaning.
Definitely intrinsic, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important to also say, two Toms, in my Minecrafters, we talk about this, you can have both.
Sure.
For example,
absolutely, yeah.
You and I talked about, I'm an educator, and it works for my professor role and also my well-being role, doing podcast, all of it, right? And that said, the paycheck's still important too. You can just be higher than a kite doing what you're doing and flying around the room teaching or doing whatever, and still need the paycheck and like the paycheck or whatever. It's important to say.
Yeah, and I think it's also external validation. If you're on the right track and you're driven by your purpose, and we will talk more, kind of break that down into the what is purposeful, but you're getting external validation of you're doing something that is positively helping others, helping the environment, helping the community, helping whatever area of cause that you are excited to positively affect, you're getting that external, feedback and that external response that, yeah, you're on the right path.
You're on track.
Yeah.
I love that, Tom. I think that's probably true for many teachers. I think of one of our daughters who teaches second grade, and here I am, this is a different, atmosphere in higher education, but she says much of the same thing that I say. She's on her way driving home, and oh my God, and she said this, and they finally, and you don't get that in a paycheck, you just don't. And like Oprah says, I like to talk about my dear friend Oprah.
Sure.
She isn't aware, but that's okay. She doesn't need to be.
Sure.
But she talks about, you know that you're on the right track, or she likes to say in alignment.
Yeah.
Also, Wayne Dyer talks about alignment. Also, Abraham Hicks talks about alignment. But you're on the right path by how you feel. You just know it. It's like, it's a knowing, right? You just, like, I know that I'm meant to be here right at this moment. There's no question.
Yep, absolutely. And we've talked in earlier podcasts about the green lights. And
yes.
But you that's the visceral, that feeling and the knowing piece is, you just, everything starts to fall into place.
Yes,
You're going down that road where it's one green light after another, after open door, open door, open door. And paths emerge. And the path before you emerges oftentimes in an effortless way.
It is, isn't it though?
And you feel, oh my gosh, things are coming so easily. The people I need to meet, the resources that I need to fulfill in order to get to this next, it's coming to me, right?
And in your lap.
Yeah. And sometimes we as humans love to be stubborn and a little obstinate when it comes to going down the wrong path. And there's no way in hell this
resistant.
Like, this is I'm gonna make this work, darn it,
Yeah.
Even though you get one red light after another.
Like a bunker, like just boom, 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 right?
The door closes. Well, I'm gonna bust through that somehow.
And the universe will let you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but what's funny is that intrinsic side is that you feel it. I know this isn't right. This just isn't working.
God, don't we know what that feeling's like?
I'm working so hard to go down this path, and I know this, cognitively and intellectually, this is where I want to go.
But I'm still
it's not.
Digging my nails in.
Yeah.
Thinking like an example might be, Tom, I'm sure you've got a million of them, with a relationship, romantically or otherwise. Maybe it's even like a close friendship, or it was a close friendship, and you've outgrown each other. It's not be a huge story, but we tend to hang on. Sometimes maybe a romantic relationship is you've outgrown each other, or maybe it's not even healthy, and which is a stronger red light, right? But we often will dig into that because maybe we'd rather be with someone who's not good for us than be alone, or I don't know. But when we force something, the whispers turn into bricks, as Oprah would say, because it's just going to blow up.
Yeah.
If we ignore the red lights, whether it's health-wise, ignoring cholesterol level or whatever it is, whispers turn into bricks and blow up.
Yeah. And I can't remember who the researcher was talking about the different levels of friendship. I'm not this, but it's the utility, the timing, and then core or something. So friends who are wonderful at the time, and you have a great relationship. There's the timing piece. There's a utility where there's a quid pro quo in a positive way.
Right.
And then there are those core friends. Maybe Brene Brown.
Gardner came to my head, but that's more the romantic one.
Yeah, so I have to go back. We'll have to kind of supplement this with the
it's correct. Okay. We have another one.
The correct one, the correct citing. But and what I always love to think about, and it's hard for us as humans, is that there is times of change.
Yes.
And evolutions. And there are friends that you have who were very close friends at the time, but things move on, things evolve. And that there's always room and opportunities for meeting new friends in different times, in different settings.
Right.
So to hold on to that friendship sometimes might not feel like going back to the purpose side.
Right.
As though that is the sense of purpose at the time. So I think that's important to kind of know feel what is right in terms of the friendships.
And doesn't it come down to, like you were saying with the green lights, it's more of a watching, but it's really listening spiritually, right? So
Absolutely.
To really, because for me anyway, when I'm in receiving mode, it's like I could hear a pin drop in Kansas. I can just hear that person said this, oh my God, that person, then somebody show up with a book that is exactly the thing I need to read. And once you're in that, what does Abraham Hicks say, tuned in, tapped in, turned on. When you're in that like catcher's mitt mode, your purpose and your meaning is just like this fluid conversation with the universe, or however you want to label it, source with capital S. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think that is that back to that, everything being connected and coming together, and on the right path. And I was just reminded of one of my interviews during research that I had, where this young person was having a tough time in their job. And they knew that they needed to make a change. So all of a sudden, this new opportunity emerged for an incredible job opportunity outside of where she was working. And it was like a dream job. But something inside just
said, don't do it.
It just didn't feel right.
It
didn't feel right. And all of her friends around her circle of friends said, oh my gosh, this is just a wonderful opportunity for you, And she would say to herself, I would be, incredibly remiss to turn this down. But it just doesn't feel right.
Right.
Ultimately, she did not take that job, and then lo and behold,
there's one right behind it, right? Better.
Her existing job changed, morphed. People moved around, and then it became a wonderful job. But it's just like you look at something from a intellectual, cognitive sense that, logical, like this is my job. This is perfect for me. But she had this internal sense that just kept telling her, it's not right.
Like the universe, or however you want to label it, God's source or higher power. It's kind of like, what did you and I say about if you want to make the universe laugh?
Tell God your plans, right?
Your plans.
Don't make God,
because it's like the universe has this perfect setup, and when we try to blow through the door, like you're saying, blow through the door, the red lights. I don't know about for you, Tom, but the few times I haven't listened to that, which isn't often, it didn't work out well for me.
Yeah, no, we as
when you ignore it, and when you do listen, like you say, the person shows up, that it falls, like the dots just connect.
Yeah, we as humans we want to, again, by our nature, to make things happen and not want to give in. But going back to purpose, I'd love to hear more about discussion you mentioned at the outset regarding the depression.
Yeah.
Leading to depression. And
well, as I know you too, you also think the same way, Tom. What this is, well, it's research based anyway, right? That we, as human beings, are wired not only for connection. We know that no matter how introverted or anybody's wiring, we all need some connection no matter what. And we also need a sense of purpose. We need a sense of purpose. And without that sense of purpose, we'll just roll meaning in there. It's hard to separate the two, really. Without that sense of meaning and purpose, we know this for a fact, it is a straight road to depression, or at the very least, deep sadness. And it's also why you and I were talking about there's such an issue with geriatric depression now, because they had a sense of meaning and purpose their whole lives. And now they're put into assisted living. Let's say they're cognitively fine, okay, even. There's depression sets in because now their meals are brought to them. They're not responsible for anything. And they get very sad, right?
Yeah. And there's one research study I remember reading about in a nursing home where folks who had a real kind of loss in their interest in life, again, maybe lost family, there's no one else no one coming to visit them. And researchers gave these folks a plant to take care of. And just a simple act of taking care of something as a purpose for taking care of others and taking care of something, that gave them a sense to live, but a sense that they were called or they were given an opportunity for a purpose. Just taking care of that plant.
Something that small.
Something that small.
Imagine, and then you and I on the flip side of that, developmental lifespan spectrum. I know, and Tom and I both have kids now, young adults, and you know, when the kids, when they were younger, trying to, you know, help dad with the dishes, with the dishwasher, they're like 3, 2.5, putting the forks in the little thing. And it takes you, anybody who's been a parent knows it takes you 10 times longer to let your toddler help you. But how important it is, because, and you watch them just glean with purpose, and they're so happy with themselves that they helped dad or mom or whoever, because they feel so purposeful, and it's meaningful for their little toddler self.
Yeah, and a little accomplishment, even though it could be
Forks.
painfully inefficient, but
Very efficient.
but it's allow that to happen. And of course, they just, again, that sense of accomplishment is, I have a job to do. I have something that's
they
going
help
to be
daddy.
helpful. And I think it's that job to do, but it's helping others, and it's that in concert with helping one another. And we've talked in the past, you know, again, where the you know, the incredible books, research, incredibly disheartening world of Viktor Frankl.
Oh yeah.
Answer for Meaning, and his experience of being in the Auschwitz concentration camp, and found that prisoners who lost that sense of purpose lost also their sense for living. So no matter how small it is, I have something I want to get back to, finish my book. It's, you know, I started writing, or I'm going to be, my purpose is to help with an extra piece of bread, or whatever piece of bread. Just a sense of helping others, or something to look forward to. And I think that is, you know, incredibly vital for the human spirit to keep going. Something that is about having that purpose of something, again, taking care of the plan in the nursing home, or having something to look forward to when you get out of horrific concentration camp. You know, it's that little bit of longing for helping to desire and have a more meaningful, a mean to live, a purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right with you there, Tom. Viktor Frankl is one of my 2 favorite psychologists. The other one's Abe Maslow. But Viktor, I actually use Man's Search for Meaning in Minecraft class, and it's life-changing for students when they read it. And there's so many parts in there. One of the parts I like the most, when he's going through, I mean, just the heinous atrocities of the Holocaust that none of us can put language to. We just can't possibly do it. When they're emaciated, and he talks about the coldness and everything, and they still, I don't remember the part about the cabaret, with these prisoners with little nothing, and just freezing and starving, and they came up with this kind of like a comedy. I don't know how else to say, like a levity hour. And I'm thinking, how did they even do that? And it got to where the prisoners looked forward to it so much, and that the meaning that Viktor brought to his fellow prisoners, and some of them even missed their rations a couple times. Can you imagine that? Speaking of Abe Maslow, it actually blows that apart a little bit, because the basic needs are here, right? We don't have a desire for the belonging and self-esteem, self-actualization without. So, and I do actually think that hierarchy is very valid, by the way. But I think this is an exception, because they did not have their basic needs met, yet looked forward to that levity amongst the absolute dread, and they found meaning and purpose, because they would take turns reciting a poem or telling a joke, and they look forward to that, and that's so nuts when you think about it. Like the mind control power of Viktor, and also his fellow, like, just there's, I can't even put language to it, because there's impressive and there's Viktor, you know what I mean? Like, wow. But the purpose he found, even under those circumstances, and also his conversations in his head with his wife, how he kind of overrode the dread going on for a good couple of years, and she had since passed and he didn't even know. But he just kept the conversations about the sunset and the this and the that and that to bring meaning and purpose to stay alive. So impressive.
Yeah. So I think for folks who are watching this is, I think going back, like, if the individuals have questions about what is their purpose, you know, and it's probably wise to do an accounting of, you know, your strengths, your gifts, your interests, how you, going back to affecting positive change in some way, So I think that everyone has some sort, I would imagine everyone has some sort of an innate feeling about what their purpose might be. And sometimes that word happiness gets infused with purpose. And as we've talked about earlier, when you focus on happiness first and foremost, it can be very self-serving, very, very, to a certain extent, selfish, but then is short-lived.
Right, fleeting.
Fleeting. So as Aristotle talked about this hedonistic life.
I love Aristotle.
Right?
Yeah.
And so with my students in teaching and working on this stuff, it's funny because they, one of the courses I taught was about happiness. I think, okay, that's going to be that's the end result. And in reality, it's the byproduct of finding meaning and purpose. Happiness, which can, as you said, can be fleeting, right? It's situational. But when there is a meaning and a purpose for what you're doing, happiness then comes as associated with that. And it's sometimes in our society, it's inverted. We're going to be happy first. That's my focus.
No, I like that, Tom. You just brought me to this wonderfully stray brain cell with Marty Seligman's The 3 Tiers for Living the Good Life, right? So he labels it pleasure, but it's kind of what we're talking about. Pleasure is the bottom. We're not saying pleasure's bad. Go have that burger, right? And whatever other Sundays and go to the beach and all that stuff, that's here, but it's not very long lasting, right? The next is the flow zone, the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and really, you're playing with your band in the garage, and all of a sudden, all the time left, and you're in the flow zone,
Lose your
right?
sense of self.
Lose your sense of self in a good way, not a codependent way, but you're just one with your writing, you're one with your and then the top tier, longest lasting good life tier is the meaning we're talking about right now. That's the longest lasting part of those tiers. Yeah,
that's kind of interesting to think about. That it is that building, but how I think when people find that sense of a calling or meaning, other things fall into place, right?
When we listen.
Yeah, and we talked about earlier, talking about Immanuel Kant. And again, that moral obligation, but given the strengths and the talents and the skills that you have, is it a moral obligation then to help others or serve that, using that with your own strengths, your own self?
And it's fun.
Yeah.
When you're doing stuff with your strengths, I mean, isn't it just fun?
Yeah.
And uncovering parts of who you are, and then when you can see it help somebody. I was just thinking, Tom, you led me to our friend Dr. Dave Landers, because he talks about it, and this fits with the purpose meaning thing too, I think, as far as strengths and maybe not knowing which direction you're going.
Yeah.
And he often has said to me, we obviously can't do what we don't know. We cannot, think about it, we can't do what we don't know. But like you're saying with the obligation, Dave says, however, once we do know, right? Once we become aware, we become responsible. Like you can't, once the switch is flipped on, you're committed. It's time to get busy and do something.
Responsibility, exactly, accountability. Yeah, that's great. Perfect.
All right, so what do you think? We'll wrap it up?
I think it's a wrap. And again, as always, any viewers, listeners who want to connect with more information or we have our resources that we'll be able to provide, but it's
I can list that right below for everybody.
Always open to hear from folks. So
okay, excellent.
Thank you for
listening.